Welcome to SWK 700. Today we're talking about family systems theory. This is your professor, Dr. Yvonne Ruiz. Understanding the family system. So family systems are based on what we already know. We talked about social systems theory. And FST is a good theory for engaging both the family and the social worker in problem solving and addressing issues within the family. The focus of this approach is on how well the family is able to function as one unit, how well they function together to meet the tasks of maintaining the family system and everything that goes into maintaining a family. How the family gets its needs met, how the family accesses resources, as well as how the family interacts to provide support and nurturing for each member of the family. This slide presents some of the main concepts of the approach of the family as a system. So, number one, the family has its own context. It is a special social environment where each family member is socialized and each family member internalizes core beliefs about the family and also about who they are. So the family context is especially important for socializing children and introducing them to relationships and the processes of childhood. A family is more than the sum of its individual parts. So this is straight from social systems theory. It means that as a whole, the family comprises a larger unit than just each member of the family collectively. So we think of the family as one entity or one unit. Each family member has roles, has responsibilities, and has a particular function within the family. Take a moment and think about your family system. What was your role? What was the role of your siblings? How did your parents interact? And how did they perform their own roles? The family system is interactive and interdependent. Each family member mutually influences the other. So this is based on reciprocity and transactions. Within the family system, there are particular relationships between and among family members. The whole family needs to interact. Some families interact more than others. Some families are more dependent and interdependent than others. Any change affects all family members. There is a need to create balance between change and stability within the family system. So this means two things. One, that a change that occurs or that happens to one family member is going to impact the whole family unit. So think about a job loss. One of the parents or one of the partners loses their job. It happens to them. However, it also has an impact on the whole family unit. So that's one simple example. Another example is one sibling experiences an accident or a traumatic event. That is also going to impact upon the other siblings and upon the parents. And then the idea that there needs to create a balance between change and stability. This idea is that the family as a unit is oriented towards an equilibrium, towards finding a place where the family can balance changes that occur to family members that impact the whole family unit and maintaining stability that means that the family is aiming for equilibrium so that the family environment is stable. Another important concept in family systems theory is the idea of family subsystems. So in every large system, there exists smaller systems within the larger system that help to organize relationships within the system as a whole. As social workers, we assess and intervene with family subsystems in order to help improve the functioning of the larger family system. So examples of common family subsystems are the subsystem of the parent and child, the subsystem of siblings, and the parents or partners as a subsystem. So the idea is that you can intervene with a subsystem in order to impact the functioning of the system as a whole. So think about conflict between parents. Generally, that type of conflict spills over and impacts the children as well. So by improving the relationship dynamics between the parents, that is going to have a positive impact on the family as a whole. Another important concept in family systems theory is the concept of boundaries. All families have boundaries, and boundaries can be viewed as a continuum from open to closed boundaries. Every system has its way of including and excluding external elements so that the line between those within the system and those outside of the system is clear. If a family has open boundaries, that means that the boundaries are permeable and they're somewhat vague and weak. An open boundary system allows elements and situations outside the family to influence it. So an example of an open boundary is where there may be a lot of people coming in and out of the family household. These people may be actual blood relations to the family, or maybe they're friends, but there's an open boundary and there's a lot of external influences, whether it's people or whether it's events that happen. And some families may even welcome external influences to a greater degree than others. Closed boundary systems isolate family members from the environment, and the family is more isolated and self-contained. In general, no family system is completely closed or completely open. It's also important to recognize that family boundaries may change according to an event or according to new family members who are introduced into the family system. And another important way that boundaries change within the family system is through the developments of the children. So, for example, as children become more involved in school activities, in sports, or external activities, that also may have an impact on family boundaries, which may become more open in including external or outside influences. The theorist that we're focusing on today is Murray Bowen. And Murray Bowen was an American psychiatrist, and he was among the pioneers of family therapy. And he was a founder of family systems therapy, which he began developing in the 1950s. And his approach to family systems is an intergenerational approach to family therapy. And one of his quotes is, "That which is created in a relationship can be fixed in a relationship." Bowen focused on family emotional systems theory. And Bowen's theory is one of human behavior that views the family as one emotional unit. And he used systems thinking to describe the complexity of the interactions within the family unit. His theory provides a framework for understanding how emotions and emotional ties are transmitted within the family system. And his focus on emotions also is psychodynamic, in that emotions are unconscious forces that are impacting the family as a whole. At the same time, they're impacting on individual family members. So his is both a systems theory and a psychodynamic theory of the transmittal of emotions. So we already talked about the concept of family boundaries, and I want to give you an example of how boundaries can cause emotional distress or emotional difficulties within the family. And of course, emotional difficulties spill over into how well the family can function. So if the family boundaries are too enmeshed, meaning that family members are closely intertwined, that results in no one family member feeling entitled to their own thoughts or feelings. One person in the family tends to speak for everyone. Individual privacy is either impossible or actively discouraged. And individual ambitions without the family may be seen as disloyal. When boundaries are too differentiated, meaning that they're too different and they're not unified, it means that there aren't any common hopes, dreams, or values within the family that would serve to make the family a more cohesive unit. There may be a very low sense of belonging to the family. Individual members' feelings may be actively denied, or they may not be seen or acknowledged. And appearances may be more important than what is actually happening within the family system. And there may be very low levels of communication between and among the family members. Now, this presents two extremes of too enmeshed and too differentiated. You can see this as a continuum, and of course, particular events such as traumas or unpredictable events or any kind of significant changes within the family system may also have an impact on boundaries, and as well as between and among family members. Some may be too enmeshed and others may be too differentiated at the same time. This gives you a sense of how complex family emotional relationships and systems can play themselves out to be. So the next few slides are going to present some information on Bowen's 8 interlocking concepts of family emotional systems theory. We're going to look at differentiation of self. We're going to look at triangles, nuclear family emotional process, family projection process, emotional cutoff, multi-generational transmission process, sibling position, and societal emotional process. Differentiation of self. So the term differentiation refers to the individual family member's ability to psychologically differentiate or separate him or herself from the family of origin in a way that preserves both family emotional ties and feeling connected to the family, at the same time separating and feeling oneself and behaving independently, so that the family member is both connected to the family, at the same time that they're not constrained by family expectations or interactions. So for Bowen, differentiation of self is a super important concept that relates to how healthy an individual can be. And the individual is most healthy when they have a balance between connection to the faculty, to the family, and also feeling a sense of independence and ability to function in a manner that is true to one's own individuality. The concept of triangles is a very important one, and it also is a very psychodynamic concept, right? So a triangle is a three-person relationship system. And the idea of triangulated relationships means that three people are involved in an emotional pattern. And the pattern is where one person uses the third person as a way to communicate or as a way to minimize or deflect the conflict that is going on between two people. So examples of triangulated relationships could be that there's conflict between the parents or the partners, and one of the partners forms a close relationship with the child as a way to deflect the conflict between the two adults, or uses the child to communicate feelings or verbal communication that the adult person cannot actually communicate to their partner. Triangulated relationships can also refer to one adult begins an affair with a person outside the family as a way to deflect or not to deal with the conflict that's actually going on between the two partners. So any three-person relationship can be triangulated, where the third person is either used in some way, or there is another person in the triangle that is an outsider or is not privy to what is actually happening between the two other people. These are very important to identify, because whatever is going on between two people will have a huge impact on the whole family system. So the family emotional process, or the FEP, refers to the dynamic shift of emotions within the family system, and particularly anxiety. So we've already talked about anxiety and what that means in terms of psychodynamic and intrapsychic experiences of discomfort or anxiety. So this is another psychodynamic idea, and the idea is that there is an anxiety that is shared among the family system. Some family members may feel the anxiety more than others, but it's part of the whole family's emotional process. So emotions provide the energy that fuels the family system, that's shared among the whole family system, and the actual relationship interactions reflect the expression of that emotion within how the family behaves, and especially how well the family is able to function. So the idea is that when you assess the family dynamics and the family interdependence and the family relationships, that is going to give you clues about the emotional energy that is shared within the family system. FEP is they're constant dynamics within the family, and they're reciprocal, and they shape the response of individuals. particularly within the family relationships, as well as spilling over into the family's network of relationships. So think about this. If there's a lot of conflict between the parents and there's a lot of acrimony and negative feelings, that's going to impact upon the children. And the children may take that anger and aggression and express that within their peer relationships. That's one way that the family relationships are shared externally as well as within the family system. Family emotional process is particularly important in its impact on children and their development. The family is the first place where children are socialized, where children learn, and where children develop those working models of attachment and relationships dynamics, which they then take and apply to their external relationships with others. FEP establishes and maintains the specific relationship context of the family in which the child develops. So this is where children learn how to act, how to behave with others, and they also develop their own sense of self within relationship dynamics. So these are 4 types of reactive family emotional processes. One is conflict within family members. Argue, fight, aggression results in poor problem solving and communication skills. The second reactive dynamic is when family members are enmeshed. Could be the whole family system, or it could be just a few family members that are enmeshed. Means they're overly involved in each other's lives. They may have difficulty separating from one another, and it also means there's a tremendous amount of anxiety with maintaining relationships and maintaining the balance of connection and differentiation. The third reactive pattern is where family members are too isolated. They rarely interact with people outside the family unit. It may especially result in difficulties for children in school to forming peer relationships and engaging with external activities. And the fourth pattern is where family members are detached. Very low level of cohesion or connection within the family system. Family members are uninterested in each other's lives, and this may also lead to a lot of permissiveness within the family system, where there's a lack of discipline, lack of supervision, and a lack of caring and nurturing within the family system. All of these patterns result in difficulties, dysfunction, and poor family functioning. Another psychodynamic concept is that of the family projection process. This describes the way that parents transmit their emotional problems and they project them on to their children, or more commonly, onto one child. So this is where the parent or both parents attribute their unacceptable thoughts and feelings onto the child. And it's a major source how the family transmits their anxiety. So this plays itself out where the child is identified as the problem, and the child may be scapegoated within the family system as the one who is causing problems, the one who needs to be fixed, when in actuality, the problems are actually located in another part of the family system, namely within the adults, who are projecting their difficulties onto the child or the children. So they're using the children as a way to deflect from their own difficulties or their own feelings of negativity and conflict. Whenever a child is identified as having difficulties, you need to look at what else is happening within the family system, because that may be a communication that the family system is sick in some way and needs to be treated as a family and not just the individual child. Emotional cutoff is another family dynamic that occurs. This is where one family member manages their unresolved emotional issues with their parents or their siblings or another family member by reducing or totally cutting off their emotional connection, their emotional contact. So it doesn't mean that they physically cut themselves off, even though they may do that as well. But it means that they limit their involvement or their emotional responses as a way of protecting themselves and protecting their well-being. So emotional cutoff is a strategy that a family member can use as a way of maintaining their mental health, as a way of maintaining their own equilibrium, and as a way of being able to live their life, but they're not actually sharing themselves or sharing within the family system. So Bowen emphasized that a family includes multiple generations. So generally we look at children, parents, and grandparents. I would also include, we look at extended family, especially if extended family relationships are important. So individual personalities and patterns of interaction among the family members often have their origins in previous generations. One way this plays itself out is if the parents had or have conflictual relationships with their own parents, or they experienced difficult family dynamics within their own families, whether there was substance abuse or other kinds of physical or sexual abuse, or there were other types of trauma that occurred between parents and their own parents. That means that parents are going to transmit those dynamics to their own children. So in that way, there's intergenerational or a multi-generational transmission process, and the children are impacted by previous events. Another way this plays itself out is with attachment theory that we've already talked about. The parents' own experiences of how they were parented are going to play a large role in how they parent their own children. So in this way, families maintain patterns within the family system. Unless the parents are conscious and actively work to create a different family dynamic that they experienced, these are going to be unconsciously transmitted within the family system. And then there's sibling position. Sibling position refers to the ways in which levels of functioning and differentiation are influenced by birth order. The idea is that sibling position in a family is an important influence on behavior and personality. So whether you were the oldest, middle, or youngest child, that creates a particular position within the family system that shapes your interactions and shapes your personality. Often we say that the oldest child is the more responsible one, the one who may play a role in caretaking or being responsible for the younger siblings. And sometimes the middle child doesn't get enough attention, so they may actually crave attention or act in ways to draw attention to themselves because they're sandwiched between the older child and the younger child. And the younger child may get the benefit of learning from their older siblings and also maybe being nurtured more, or maybe being able to benefit because the parents have already gone through child discipline with the older two, and by the time the third child comes along, there's more permissiveness within the family, or the expectation that the older siblings will take care of them. These are, of course, generalized. They don't play they don't play themselves out in the same way. Another dynamic between siblings may be that one child is identified as the good child or the smart child. Another one may be labeled as the problem child. So analyzing sibling position and sibling relationships is an important subsystem. And I also want to include a note about family societal emotions. There's not a slide for that, but that refers to the family's relationships with external systems. We've gone through a little bit of that with social systems theory, where we look at the impact of the individual, in this case, the family unit, with external entities, such as the school, such as community or neighborhood organizations and activities, as well as other agencies, healthcare, for example, or adult work environments. The idea is that these external systems also have an impact within the family system. And just think of a child and the dynamics of the child in school. If there are difficulties in schooling or learning difficulties, that may also have an impact within the family system. I also need to mention here that these are very much generalized. They're very helpful concepts, but we need to think of the ways that families have evolved in our society. There are tremendous amounts of variety in how families come together. For example, blended families, families that are chosen, LGBTQ families, families with adopted children or foster children, cultural impact on families and cultural traditions, Latino families, for example, who may be dealing with immigration issues and policies, may be dealing with being transnational families where some family members live in another country, but there are still maintaining close family ties. So the list of different types of families go on, and we need to think about the family in their particular social context and cultural context, and all of the dynamics that go along with that. So families are complex systems, and we need to think about how the family defines itself in addition to the way that families are defined by society. Thank you for listening this far.